The sun rose mercilessly over the dusty horizon of Lewiston, Idaho, as Katherine O'Malley's swollen, blistered hands gripped the wooden handle of the mop, her once vibrant green eyes now dulled with exhaustion and resignation. The year was 1876, and for 3 years since her father's death, she had been trapped in an endless cycle of servitude at Morgan's boarding house, working to pay off a debt that somehow never diminished no matter how many floors she scrubbed or meals she prepared. Katherine. The breakfast dishes aren't going to wash themselves. Mrs. Morgan's shrill voice cut through the early morning quiet. The stout woman stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her arms folded across her chest, a permanent look of dissatisfaction etched on her face. "Yes, madam." "I'm nearly finished with the hallway," Katherine replied, pushing a strand of auburn hair back under her worn cap. At 22, she felt decades older, her youth slipping away with each passing day of endless labor. "Well, hurry up. We've got new guests arriving on the afternoon stage, and everything needs to be perfect. And don't think I didn't notice you were late starting this morning. That's another day added to your father's debt." Katherine bit her tongue to keep from protesting. It was always the same another day. Another dollar added to the mysterious debt her father had supposedly owed the Morgans before his sudden death. With no written record and no one to advocate for her, Katherine had become little more than an indentured servant, working from sunup to sundown with only meager meals and a tiny attic room as compensation. As Mrs. Morgan retreated, Katherine leaned against her mop for a moment's respite. Her hands ached, and her back throbbed from bending over washtubs and scrubbing floors. She closed her eyes, remembering her father's small homestead outside of town now claimed by the Morgans as payment. Sometimes she wondered if there had ever been a debt at all, or if the influential family had simply seen an opportunity to acquire more land and free labor when her father, the town's former blacksmith, had died of pneumonia. The creak of the front door startled Katherine from her brief moment of rest. Mrs. Morgan would be furious if she caught her idle. She quickly resumed her mopping, keeping her head down as heavy boots sounded on the wooden floor. "Pardon me, madam," a deep voice said, causing Katherine to look up in surprise at being addressed with such respect. Standing before her was a tall man with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His dark brown hat was pushed back slightly, revealing sandy blonde hair and the bluest eyes Katherine had ever seen. He was dusty from travel, but there was something dignified about his bearing that even trail dirt couldn't diminish. "I'm looking for a room if you have one available," he said, his voice carrying the slightest hint of a southern drawl. I'm not the proprietor," Katherine stammered, suddenly conscious of her threadbare dress and disheveled appearance. "Mrs. Morgan handles the rooms. If you'll wait here, I'll fetch her for you." "Much obliged," the man replied with a tip of his hat. As Katherine turned to go, she noticed his gaze lingering on her reddened hands wrapped around the mop handle. A flicker of something concern, perhaps, crossed his face, but she hurried away before she could be certain. Mrs. Morgan appeared with remarkable speed, her stern demeanor transforming into saccharine politeness at the prospect of a paying customer. Katherine continued her work, listening as the stranger introduced himself as Samuel Calloway, recently arrived from Texas and looking to establish himself in the cattle business around Lewiston. "I hear there's good grazing land available in this territory," Mr. Calloway said as Mrs. Morgan eagerly showed him to the register. "Indeed there is, Mr. Calloway. My husband would be happy to discuss business opportunities with you. He's quite knowledgeable about local properties." The sugary tone in Mrs. Morgan's voice made Katherine want to retch. The Morgans had a habit of helping newcomers acquire land, usually at outrageous prices, or unfavorable terms. Katherine kept her head down as Mrs. Morgan led Mr. Calloway upstairs to see a room, but she could feel his eyes on her as they passed. It was probably just curiosity, she told herself. She was used to being invisible to most of the town's residents and visitors alike. The days that followed brought no respite from Katherine's grueling routine, though she found herself increasingly aware of Samuel Calloway's presence in the boarding house. Unlike other guests who barely acknowledged her existence, he always offered a kind word or a nod when their paths crossed. Once, when Mrs. Morgan wasn't looking, he even helped Katherine lift a heavy bucket of water she was struggling with, his strong hands taking the weight from her own trembling ones. "Thank you," she had whispered, fearful of Mrs. Morgan discovering this small kindness. "No trouble at all, Miss O'Malley," he'd replied, using her name though she didn't recall telling it to him. A week after his arrival, Katherine was up well before dawn, stoking the kitchen fire to prepare breakfast for the boarders. Her eyes burned with fatigue. The previous night she had been kept up until midnight mending linens after completing her regular chores. As she worked, she heard the back door open quietly. "You're up mighty early," came Samuel Calloway's deep voice from the doorway. Katherine nearly dropped the coffee pot she was filling. "Mr. Calloway, you startled me. I didn't expect anyone to be awake at this hour." "I'm used to early mornings on the ranch," he said, stepping into the kitchen. He was already fully dressed, as if prepared for a day's work. "And please call me Sam. I've never been one for formalities." "I shouldn't," Katherine replied, turning back to her task. Mrs. Morgan wouldn't approve of such familiarity with the guests. Sam moved closer, leaning against the large wooden table that dominated the center of the kitchen. "Mrs. Morgan isn't awake yet, is she?" "No, but then I don't see the harm." His smile was warm, genuine in a way that made something flutter in Katherine's chest. "I've been watching you, Miss O'Malley. You work harder than anyone I've ever seen." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's my responsibility." "Is it?" His blue eyes seemed to peer straight through her carefully constructed walls. "I've been making inquiries around town. People say you weren't always working here, that you had a place of your own once with your father." The mention of her father and their lost homestead made Katherine's hands tremble. "That was a long time ago. I have a debt to pay now. A debt that never seems to diminish from what I gather." His voice had hardened slightly, though not directed at her. "The townsfolk talk, Katherine. Not everyone approves of how the Morgans conduct their business." Katherine glanced nervously toward the doorway. "Please, you shouldn't say such things. If they heard you, I'm not afraid of the Morgans," Sam stated simply, as if commenting on the weather. "And neither should you be." Before Katherine could respond, she heard Mrs. Morgan's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Sam straightened, tipping his hat to her with a wink. "Thank you for the early coffee, Miss O'Malley. I have business in town today, but perhaps we'll speak again soon." He was gone before Mrs. Morgan entered, leaving Katherine with a strange feeling of both hope and dread. No one had shown concern for her situation in years. Most of the townspeople either believed the Morgan's tale of her father's substantial debt, or simply didn't care enough to question it. Why would this stranger, this cowboy from Texas, take an interest in her plight? As the day progressed, Katherine found herself watching for Sam's return, though she scolded herself for such foolishness. Men like Samuel Calloway didn't concern themselves with the troubles of women like her. He was probably just being kind, or perhaps fishing for gossip about the town's prominent family. Yet when she was sent to the mercantile that afternoon to collect supplies, she found Sam there, deep in conversation with Mr. Henderson, the elderly shopkeeper who had been one of her father's few friends. "Ah, Katherine," Mr. Henderson called when he spotted her. We were just talking about your father's old place. Such a shame what happened there." Katherine felt a chill run through her. No one had mentioned her father's homestead to her in years. "Mr. Henderson, I have a list from Mrs. Morgan." Sam stepped forward. "Miss O'Malley, I hope you don't mind that I've been asking about your father. James Henderson here was telling me what a fine blacksmith he was." "The best in the territory," Mr. Henderson agreed, his roomy eyes soft with memory. "And that land of his prime spot with the creek running through it. Never did believe that nonsense about him owing the Morgans a fortune." "Mr. Henderson, please," Katherine whispered, glancing around nervously though the shop was empty. "I should collect Mrs. Morgan's order and return." "Of course, child." The old man shuffled behind his counter. "But you remember, your father was an honest man. Don't let anyone tell you different." As Mr. Henderson gathered the items on Mrs. Morgan's list, Sam moved closer to Katherine. "I'm riding out to look at your father's old property this afternoon," he said quietly. "Why?" Katherine couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Call it curiosity." His expression gave little away, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Is there anything there I should look for?" "Anything your father might have left behind." Katherine hesitated. She hadn't been allowed to return to collect any personal belongings after her father's death. Mrs. Morgan had claimed everything as part of the payment for the alleged debt. "There was a strong box," she finally whispered. "My father kept it under a loose floorboard beneath his bed. I don't know what was in it, he never showed me, but he always said it contained proof of everything important." Sam nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll keep that in mind." The transaction completed, Katherine hurried back to the boarding house, her mind whirling with questions. She couldn't afford to hope that anything would come of Sam's interest, yet a tiny spark had been lit in her heart, the first in 3 long years of servitude. That evening, as Katherine served dinner to the boarders, she noticed Sam's absence. Mrs. Morgan remarked on it with obvious displeasure. "Paying for a room and meals, then gallivanting off who knows where," she complained to her husband. "These cowboys have no sense of propriety." Mr. Morgan, a corpulent man whose main activity seemed to be counting his money and intimidating those who owed him, merely grunted in response. "As long as he pays, what do we care where he takes his meals?" Katherine kept her head down, trying not to draw attention to herself, but her mind was on Sam and his mysterious errand to her father's old homestead. Would he find anything? Would it even matter if he did? It was well past midnight when Katherine, exhausted after another grueling day, finally climbed the narrow stairs to her attic room. The space was stifling in summer and freezing in winter, with only a thin blanket and straw mattress for comfort. Tonight, however, she barely noticed the discomfort as she collapsed onto the bed, too tired even to remove her worn shoes. A soft tapping at her window startled her awake. Katherine sat up, heart pounding. Her room was on the 3rd floor, with only a steep roof and a drop to the ground below her window. Who could possibly be there? The tapping came again, more insistent. Katherine cautiously approached the window and peered out into the darkness. To her astonishment, Sam Calloway's face appeared, illuminated faintly by the moonlight. He was perched precariously on the sloped roof, one hand gripping the window frame. Katherine quickly unlatched the window. "Mr. Calloway, what are you doing? You'll fall." "I've scaled worse than this," he whispered with a grin that belied the danger of his position. "May I come in? I found something you need to see." Katherine hesitated only briefly before stepping back to allow him entry. Sam slipped through the window with surprising grace for such a large man, landing quietly on the floorboards. He straightened, and Katherine suddenly became aware of how small her room was and how improper it was to have a man in her private quarters. As if sensing her discomfort, Sam maintained a respectful distance. "I apologize for the intrusion, Miss O'Malley, but I couldn't risk the Morgans seeing me speak with you." "Did you go to my father's homestead?" Katherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam nodded, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a small leather-bound book. "I found your father's strongbox hidden exactly where you said it would be. The Morgans apparently never discovered it." He held out the book. "This was inside, along with these." He produced several folded documents from another pocket. In the dim light filtering through the window, Katherine could make out official-looking seals and signatures. "It's your father's journal," Sam explained as Katherine took the book with trembling hands. "And the deed to your land, properly registered with the territorial authorities. There's also this." The final document he handed her appeared to be a bank draft. "What is this?" Katherine asked, struggling to make out the figures in the darkness. "It's a receipt showing that your father paid off his loan to Morgan in full 3 months before he died." Sam's voice was tight with controlled anger. "The debt they claim you're working off never existed, Katherine. They've been lying to you for years." Katherine's legs gave way and she sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching the precious documents. "I knew it," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I knew my father would never have left me with such a burden, but without proof, no one would believe me against the Morgans' word." "You have proof now," Sam said, crouching down to meet her eyes. "The question is, what will you do with it?" Katherine stared at the journal in her hands, running her fingers over the worn leather that had once been touched by her father. 3 years of her life had been stolen from her, 3 years of back-breaking labor and humiliation. The anger that rose within her was sudden and fierce. "I want justice," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "I want my home back, and I want everyone to know what the Morgans have done." Sam smiled, a slow, approving smile that lit his eyes even in the darkness. "I was hoping you'd say that. I have a plan if you're willing to trust me." "Why?" Katherine asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he first showed her kindness. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Sam was quiet for a moment, his expression turning serious. "My mother was forced into a similar situation after my father died. A powerful man in our town claimed my father owed him, took our ranch, and made my mother work as his housekeeper to pay the non-existent debt." His jaw tightened. "She worked herself to death within 2 years. I was 14, too young to stop it. I swore I'd never stand by and watch such injustice again if I could help it." The raw pain in his voice resonated with Katherine's own suffering. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "I'm so sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," Sam replied, though the gentle way he turned his hand to clasp hers suggested the wound was still there. "But when I saw your hands, raw from work, and the way Mrs. Morgan speaks to you, I knew I had to do something." For a moment, they sat in silence, their hands still joined. Then Sam cleared his throat and gently withdrew. "I should go before someone notices I'm missing. Tomorrow morning, be ready to leave after you serve breakfast. Pack whatever you can carry without raising suspicion. Leave." "But where would I go?" "To your home," Sam said simply. "It's still yours legally. The Morgans have no claim to it. But they won't just let me walk away. They'll come after me. Let them try." The quiet confidence in Sam's voice gave Katherine courage. "I've already spoken with Sheriff Taylor and showed him the documents. He wasn't happy to learn he's been misled by the Morgans all these years. He'll back us up if needed." Katherine felt a surge of hope, tempered by fear of the unknown. "What about you? Why would you risk antagonizing the Morgans?" "They're powerful in this town." Sam stood, moving back toward the window. "Some things are worth the risk, Miss O'Malley." His smile in the moonlight made Catherine's heart flutter inexplicably. "Besides, I came to Idaho looking for a place to settle, and I hear there's fine grazing land available near a certain homestead with a creek running through it." Before Catherine could respond, he had slipped back through the window with a final whispered, "Until tomorrow." Catherine sat for a long time after he'd gone, clutching her father's journal to her chest, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't dared consider for years. Freedom, justice, a return to the home she had loved. And perhaps, though she scarcely allowed herself to acknowledge it, something more, something kindled in the blue eyes of a cowboy who had appeared in her life like an answered prayer. Sleep was impossible that night. Catherine read her father's journal by the light of a single candle stub, tears streaming down her face as his words brought him back to her. His pride in their land, his plans for the future, his love for his daughter, it was all there in his careful handwriting. And most importantly, detailed accounts of his dealings with Morgan, including the final payment of his loan, witnessed by the bank manager. By dawn, Catherine had made her decision. She would trust Samuel Calloway and fight for what was rightfully hers. Breakfast preparation proceeded as usual, though Catherine's heart raced with anticipation. She had carefully packed her few possessions: a change of clothes, a faded photograph of her parents, a small silver locket that had been her mother's, into a bundle hidden beneath her bed. The precious documents were safely tucked inside her dress, close to her heart. Sam appeared for breakfast, giving her only the slightest nod of acknowledgement as he took his place at the table with the other boarders. Mrs. Morgan hovered as always, fawning over her paying guests while barking orders at Catherine. "More coffee here, girl, and be quick about it. Mr. Peterson's eggs are getting cold. Honestly, I don't know why I put up with such incompetence." Catherine bit her tongue, knowing it would be the last time she would have to endure such treatment. She poured coffee with steady hands, her newfound resolve giving her strength. As the boarders finished their meal and began to disperse, Sam lingered, ostensibly reading a newspaper. Mrs. Morgan, satisfied that her paying guests were taken care of, turned her attention back to Catherine. "Once you've cleared the breakfast things, I want the parlor floor scrubbed and the front windows washed. Mr. Morgan is expecting potential investors this afternoon, and everything must be spotless." "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mrs. Morgan," Catherine said, her voice surprisingly calm despite her racing heart. Mrs. Morgan turned, her face a mask of outrage. "I beg your pardon." "Who do you think you're talking to, girl?" I said. "That won't be possible," Catherine repeated, straightening to her full height. "I'm leaving today. I'm going home to my father's homestead." Mrs. Morgan's face flushed an ugly shade of red. "Home, you ungrateful wretch. Your home is here, where we've graciously provided for you while you work off your father's debt. You'll go nowhere until that debt is paid in full." "A debt that doesn't exist," Sam interjected, folding his newspaper and rising from the table. "Miss O'Malley has proof that her father paid his loan to your husband before he died. The deed to the homestead is legally hers." Mrs. Morgan's eyes darted between them, momentary confusion giving way to calculating fury. "This is absurd. William," she shouted for her husband, "come here at once." Mr. Morgan appeared from his office, red-faced and irritable. "What's all this commotion? This cowboy is trying to steal our servant girl," Mrs. Morgan spluttered, filling her head with nonsense about owning property. "It's not nonsense," Catherine said firmly, pulling the documents from her dress. "I have my father's journal and the receipt showing his loan was paid in full. I also have the deed to our homestead. Sheriff Taylor has seen them and confirmed their authenticity." Mr. Morgan's face blanched slightly at the mention of the sheriff. "Now see here," he blustered, though with less conviction than his wife. "Whatever documents you think you have are legally binding," Sam finished for him, moving to stand beside Katherine. "Miss O'Malley will be leaving with me today. She's entitled to 3 years of back wages for her labor, but she's willing to forego that claim if you relinquish any pretense of ownership over her father's property immediately." "This is outrageous," Mrs. Morgan shrieked. "William, don't let them get away with this." But Mr. Morgan, ever the businessman, seemed to be calculating the cost of fighting this battle. "How do we know these documents aren't forgeries?" he asked, though the sweat beading on his forehead suggested he already knew the answer. "Sheriff Taylor would be happy to discuss that with you," Sam replied smoothly. "In fact, he's expecting us at his office this morning to file formal complaints for fraud and false imprisonment. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to settle this matter privately." The standoff lasted only moments longer before Mr. Morgan seemed to deflate. "Take the girl and go," he muttered, ignoring his wife's gasp of outrage. "But this isn't over, Calloway. You've made enemies in Lewiston today." "I've made worse," Sam replied with a dangerous smile. He turned to Katherine. "Ready to go home, Miss O'Malley?" Katherine looked around the kitchen where she'd spent countless hours in thankless labor, at the Morgans who had stolen years of her life, and finally at Sam, whose steady presence gave her courage. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm ready." She didn't look back as they walked out the front door of Morgan's boarding house. Sam had 2 horses waiting his own sturdy gelding, and a gentle mare he'd apparently purchased for her. Katherine's few possessions were quickly secured, and with Sam's help she mounted the mare, adjusting her skirts as best she could. "You remember how to ride?" Sam asked, swinging easily onto his own horse. "It's been a while," Katherine admitted, "but yes, my father taught me when I was young." "Good. It's about 5 miles to your homestead. We'll take it slow." As they rode through the main street of Lewiston, Katherine felt the curious stares of townspeople. She sat straighter in her saddle, chin high. Let them look. Let them see Katherine O'Malley reclaiming her dignity and her rightful place. Sheriff Taylor nodded to them as they passed his office, a silent acknowledgement of his support. A few others, Mr. Henderson from the Mercantile, Mrs. Wilson, who had once been a friend of Katherine's mother, smiled or waved. Not everyone had forgotten her, it seemed. The ride to the homestead took them through rolling hills covered in spring grass and wildflowers. With each mile that passed, Katherine felt layers of servitude falling away from her soul. By the time they crested the final hill and the small cabin came into view, nestled beside the creek with cottonwoods shading its roof, she was crying openly. "Home," she whispered, the word a prayer on her lips. The cabin was dusty and neglected, but still standing solid. The Morgans had apparently made no use of it after claiming it, perhaps intending to sell it once they'd established their ownership more firmly. "It needs some work," Sam observed as they dismounted in the yard, "but the structure looks sound." "It's perfect," Katherine breathed, approaching the cabin slowly, almost afraid it might disappear if she moved too quickly. "I can't believe I'm really here." She pushed open the door, which creaked on hinges that needed oil. Inside, furniture was covered with sheets. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, but it was unmistakably the home she remembered. Her father's chair still stood by the fireplace. The table where they had shared meals remained in the center of the main room. Even the quilt her mother had made still hung on the wall, though faded by time and sunlight. "Welcome home, Katherine," Sam said quietly from the doorway. She turned to him, suddenly overcome with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. Without your help, I might never have escaped them." "You don't owe me any thanks," Sam replied, his blue eyes serious. "What the Morgans did to you was wrong. Anyone with a conscience would have helped." But no one did, until you came, Katherine pointed out softly. Sam looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with her praise. Well, there's plenty of work to be done to make this place livable again. Let's start by airing it out and seeing what supplies we need. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity as they threw open windows, beat dust from rugs and furniture, and scrubbed surfaces clean. Sam repaired broken hinges and a leaky section of roof, while Katherine salvaged what she could from the neglected garden plot. They worked side by side in comfortable companionship, stopping only when hunger demanded it. "I'm afraid there's not much for a meal," Katherine said apologetically as the afternoon waned. "I didn't think to bring supplies." "I did," Sam replied with a grin, retrieving a saddlebag from his horse. He produced bread, cheese, dried meat, and even a small jar of preserves. "Nothing fancy, but it'll keep us going until we can ride into town for proper provisions tomorrow." They ate on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and purple. It felt surreal to Katherine, this simple act of sitting in peace, eating food she hadn't had to prepare for others, with no Mrs. Morgan to criticize her or add to her endless list of chores. "It's so quiet," she murmured, more to herself than to Sam. "Too quiet for you?" he asked, glancing at her profile in the fading light. Katherine smiled, a genuine smile that felt foreign on her face after so long. "No, it's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard." They lapsed into comfortable silence as darkness fell. Fireflies began to blink in the tall grass near the creek, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. "I should be going," Sam said eventually, rising to his feet. "It's not proper for me to stay here with you unchaperoned, and you need your rest." Katherine felt a sudden panic at the thought of being left alone. "Where will you go? Back to town?" Sam shook his head. "I've been camping just over that ridge," he said, pointing to a hill about half a mile away. "Close enough if you need anything, but far enough to keep your reputation intact." Katherine hadn't given a thought to her reputation after 3 years of servitude. Such concerns seemed trivial, but she appreciated his consideration. "Will I see you tomorrow, if you'd like?" he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I meant what I said about helping you get this place back in working order, but I don't want to impose." "You could never impose," Katherine said quickly, then blushed at her eagerness. "I mean, I would welcome your help and your company." The smile that spread across Sam's face made her heart skip a beat. "Then I'll be back at first light. Try to get some sleep, Katherine. You're safe now." As she watched him ride away, leading his horse carefully in the growing darkness, Katherine felt an unfamiliar lightness in her chest. For the first time in years, she had hoped for tomorrow. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt the stirrings of something that might, if she dared to nurture it, become more than gratitude toward the man who had helped her reclaim her freedom. Inside the cabin, Katherine prepared for sleep in the bed that had once been her own. Though the mattress was musty and the room still held the chill of neglect, she had never felt more content. Just before blowing out the candle, she opened her father's journal once more, turning to the last entry he had written before his death. "Katherine will inherit all I have, which is not much in material goods but rich in honest work and memories. I pray she finds a good man someday, one who sees her value and treats her with the respect she deserves. Until then, I know she has the strength of her mother and the determination of her old pa. She will endure." "I did endure, Papa," Katherine whispered to the silent room. "And perhaps I have found that good man you prayed for." Sleep came easily that night, deep and dreamless, without the fear of Mrs. Morgan's shrill voice waking her before dawn. When Katherine did wake, it was to sunlight streaming through windows that needed washing and the distant sound of chopping wood. She dressed quickly in her cleanest dress, still threadbare, but somehow less shameful now that she wore it in her own home, and ventured outside to find Sam already hard at work, his shirt sleeves rolled up as he split logs for the fireplace. "Good morning," she called, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "You're up early." Sam paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the morning coolness. "Told you I'd be here at first light," he replied with a grin. "Hope the chopping didn't wake you." "Not at all. I haven't slept so well in years." Katherine hesitated, suddenly shy. "Have you eaten? I could make coffee if you've brought supplies." "I've eaten, but coffee sounds mighty fine." Sam set down the axe and reached for his saddlebag. "I brought more provisions: flour, coffee, beans, some bacon. Thought we could have a proper breakfast." The ease with which he included her in his plans, the simple use of "we," warmed Katherine more than she cared to admit. They moved into the kitchen together, and Katherine found herself enjoying the simple domestic task of preparing a meal that wasn't under Mrs. Morgan's critical eye. "This bacon smells divine," she said as it sizzled in her mother's old cast iron pan. "I haven't had meat for breakfast in ages." "The Morgans didn't feed you properly," Sam observed, his tone darkening. "It wasn't a question." Katherine shrugged slightly. "I ate what was left after the boarders were served, often just bread and drippings." She smiled to lighten the mood. "This is a feast by comparison." Sam watched her work, his expression unreadable. "You deserve better, Katherine. You always did." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet conviction, brought unexpected tears to Katherine's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on turning the bacon before it burned. "Well, I have better now, thanks to you." They ate at the kitchen table, planning the day's work between bites of bacon and cornbread. The homestead needed significant attention after 3 years of neglect. The vegetable garden was overgrown, the chicken coop had collapsed, the corral fence had several broken sections, and the cabin itself needed repairs to windows and doors. "It's overwhelming," Katherine admitted, surveying the list they'd compiled. "I don't know where to start." "One task at a time," Sam advised. "We'll focus on making the cabin secure and comfortable first, then work outward. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say." "We?" Katherine questioned softly. "Sam, I'm grateful for your help, but I can't expect you to rebuild my entire homestead. Surely you have your own plans, your own life to attend to." Sam was quiet for a moment, absently turning his coffee cup in his large, capable hands. "Truth is, Katherine, I came to Idaho looking for a place to settle. My wandering days are behind me. I've saved enough from my years working cattle to buy a decent spread, start my own herd." He met her eyes directly. "I'd be honored to help you rebuild here for as long as you'll allow it." The sincerity in his gaze made Katherine's breath catch. "Why?" she asked again, echoing her question from that night in her attic room. "Why would you invest so much in helping someone you barely know?" Sam set down his cup, his expression serious. "When I first saw you at the boarding house, working yourself to exhaustion with no complaint, I recognized something in you that reminded me of my mother. The same quiet dignity, the same refusal to be broken by circumstance." His voice softened. "But there's more to it than that. I've met many people in my travels, Katherine, but few with your kind of strength. Few I've wanted to know better." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to name it but both acknowledging its presence. Katherine felt a blush rising to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I'd welcome your help, Sam, for as long as you're willing to give it." His smile warmed her more thoroughly than the morning sun streaming through the window. "Then let's get to work." The days that followed established a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Each morning, Sam would arrive at dawn, bringing supplies or tools he'd purchased in town. They would work side by side until sunset, repairing, cleaning, planting, building. Katherine used her father's savings, hidden in the strongbox and untouched by the Morgans, to purchase chickens, 2 milk cows, and seeds for the garden. News of her return to the homestead and the Morgans' deception spread through Lewiston like wildfire. Some townsfolk, emboldened by her stand, came forward with their own stories of the family's unscrupulous business practices. Others, particularly those who had ignored Katherine's plight for years, kept their distance, embarrassed or unwilling to admit their complicity through inaction. A few, like Mr. Henderson from the Mercantile and Mrs. Wilson, came to the homestead bearing gifts: a homemade pie, a sack of seed potatoes, offers of help with the planting. Katherine welcomed them with grace, holding no grudges against those who had been kind to her father or who simply hadn't known the truth of her situation. As for the Morgans, they made no direct moves against her, though Katherine heard rumors that they were planning to leave Lewiston, their standing in the community irreparably damaged by the scandal. She felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only relief that their influence would no longer threaten her or others like her. Through it all, Sam was a constant presence, strong, steady, unfailingly respectful of her independence while offering support whenever she needed it. They worked together as if they had done so for years, each anticipating the other's needs, sharing the labor and the small triumphs as each piece of the homestead was reclaimed. It was during a rare moment of rest, about 2 weeks after her return, that Katherine finally asked the question that had been on her mind. They were sitting on the newly repaired porch swing, watching the sunset after a long day of working in the vegetable garden. "Sam," she began hesitantly, "you mentioned you came to Idaho looking for land of your own. Have you found anything suitable?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant hills. "I've looked at a few properties," he admitted. "There's good grazing land about 10 miles east of here. Fair price, good water access." "Oh," Katherine tried to keep the disappointment from her voice. The thought of Sam settling permanently so close by should have been comforting, but instead it stirred an unexpected loneliness. In just 2 weeks, she had grown accustomed to his daily presence, his quiet strength, his gentle humor. The idea of him building a life separate from hers left an emptiness she wasn't prepared to face. "But I haven't made any offers yet," Sam continued, glancing at her sidelong. "Wanted to be sure it was the right move." "What would make it the right move?" Katherine asked, her heart beating faster though she couldn't say why. Sam turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "That would depend on a few things. Mainly on whether a certain neighbor might welcome my permanent presence in the area." Katherine's breath caught. "I believe this neighbor would welcome it very much," she said softly. Sam's hand moved to cover hers on the porch swing between them. His palm was warm, calloused from hard work but gentle in its touch. "Katherine," he began, his usual confidence seemingly replaced by uncharacteristic nervousness, "I know we haven't known each other long, and I don't want to presume or rush you. You've only just regained your independence, and the last thing I want is for you to feel pressured in any way." "But," Katherine prompted when he paused, "but I find myself thinking about you constantly," he admitted, his voice deepening. "About your courage, your kindness, your determination. I admire the woman you are, Katherine O'Malley, and I'd like the chance to court you properly if you're willing." Joy bubbled up in Katherine's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "I'd like that very much, Sam," she whispered. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the hills. "Then may I begin by escorting you to church on Sunday, and perhaps to dinner afterward at the hotel. It's time the people of Lewiston see you as you truly are, not as a servant, but as the remarkable woman I've come to know." Yes, Katherine replied simply. Happiness making further words unnecessary, Sam lifted her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her knuckles that sent warmth cascading through her entire body. I should go, he said reluctantly, rising from the swing, but I'll be back tomorrow as always. As Katherine watched him ride away into the twilight, she wrapped her arms around herself, savoring the lingering warmth of his touch and the promise of what tomorrow might bring. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a future filled with not just independence, but love. Sunday arrived bright and clear, the kind of spring day that seemed designed for new beginnings. Katherine woke early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. She carefully laid out her best dress, a simple blue cotton that Mrs. Wilson had helped her alter from one of her mother's old gowns. It wasn't fancy by any measure, but it was clean and presentable, and more importantly, it was hers by choice, not by necessity. After bathing with special care, using a small piece of scented soap that had been another gift from Mrs. Wilson, Katherine arranged her auburn hair in a simple but elegant style, leaving some soft curls to frame her face. As she fastened her mother's silver locket around her neck, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above her washstand and paused in surprise. The woman looking back at her was changed from the downtrodden servant who had slaved at Morgan's boarding house. Though still thin, her face had lost the gaunt, haunted look of perpetual exhaustion. Her green eyes were bright with anticipation rather than dulled by despair. And most noticeably, she was smiling a genuine smile that reached those eyes and softened her entire countenance. Mama would be proud, she whispered to her reflection. Papa too. The sound of a horse approaching pulled her from her reverie. Sam was early, but Katherine was ready, having been too excited to dawdle. She took one final look in the mirror, smoothed her skirts, and went to meet him. The sight that greeted her on her porch steps nearly took her breath away. Sam stood there, hat in hand, looking more handsome than any man had a right to be. Gone were the work clothes she had grown accustomed to seeing him in. Instead, he wore a clean white shirt, dark vest, and string tie, his sandy hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. But it was the look in his eyes as he saw her that made Katherine's heart skip a beat. You look beautiful, he said simply, the sincerity in his voice leaving no room for doubt. Thank you, Katherine replied, suddenly shy. You look quite handsome yourself. Sam offered his arm with a smile. Shall we? I've brought the buggy rather than horses. Thought it might be more comfortable for you in your dress. The thoughtfulness of this gesture was not lost on Katherine. She placed her hand on his arm, acutely aware of the solid strength beneath the fabric of his shirt, and allowed him to help her into the waiting buggy. The ride to town was filled with easy conversation and comfortable silences. As they approached Lewiston, however, Katherine felt her anxiety rising. This would be her first public appearance since leaving the Morgans' employ, her first time attending church as herself, rather than as the boarding house servant who sat in the back pew and slipped out before the final hymn to prepare Sunday dinner for the boarders. Nervous? Sam asked perceptively as the church spire came into view. A little, Katherine admitted. It feels strange to be going into town not for errands or on Mrs. Morgan's business, but for myself. You have nothing to be anxious about, Sam assured her, his hand covering hers where it rested on the seat between them. You belong here as much as anyone, more than some, I'd wager. His confidence bolstered her, and by the time they reached the white clapboard church at the edge of town, Katherine had her nerves under control. Sam helped her down from the buggy with the same gentle respect he had shown since the day they met, then offered his arm again to escort her inside. Heads turned as they entered, whispers following in their wake. Katherine kept her chin up, refusing to be intimidated. Sam led her not to the back pews where servants traditionally sat, but to a respectable position midway down the center aisle. As they settled into their seats, Katherine was aware of curious glances and murmured conversations, but also of several friendly nods and welcoming smiles. Mrs. Wilson stopped to greet them warmly, as did Mr. Henderson and several others who had known her father. Even the minister, Reverend Parker, made a point of welcoming Katherine back to the congregation before the service began. "It's good to see you here, Miss O'Malley," he said kindly. "Your father was a valued member of this community, and you are most welcome among us." The service itself was comforting in its familiarity, the same hymns Katherine had sung as a child, the same prayers that had sustained her through her darkest days at the boarding house. When the collection plate was passed, she proudly contributed a small coin from her father's savings, no longer forced to sit empty-handed as it passed her by. Throughout it all, Sam remained a steady presence beside her, his deep voice joining in the hymns, his attention respectfully focused on the sermon. Once, when a particularly pointed comment from the Reverend about caring for the less fortunate caused several congregants to shift uncomfortably, Sam's hand found hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of all she had endured and the community's failure to protect her. After the service, many people approached to speak with Katherine, some apologizing awkwardly for not realizing her situation, others simply welcoming her back as if she had been away on an extended journey rather than living in their midst as a virtual slave. She accepted both with grace, neither dwelling on past hurts nor pretending they hadn't happened. "You handle yourself with remarkable dignity," Sam commented as they finally made their way out of the churchyard. "Many would be bitter after what you've been through." "Bitterness would only give the Morgans continued power over me," Katherine replied thoughtfully. "I prefer to look forward now, not back." Sam's admiring smile warmed her more thoroughly than the spring sunshine. "Wise as well as beautiful, you continue to impress me, Katherine O'Malley." The hotel dining room was busy with the after-church crowd, but the manager, Mr. Peterson, a former boarder at the Morgans who had always been kind to Katherine, immediately showed them to a good table by the window. "It's a pleasure to serve you as a guest for a change, Miss O'Malley," he said with a genuine smile. "Your father was good to my family when we first arrived in Lewiston. I'm glad to see his daughter properly respected at last." The meal that followed was the most pleasant Katherine could remember in years. The food was excellent, but it was the company that made the experience truly special. Sam was attentive without being overbearing, engaging her in conversation about books they had both read, sharing stories of his travels that made her laugh, and listening with genuine interest when she spoke of her hopes for the homestead's future. "I'd like to expand the vegetable garden," she explained between bites of roast beef. "Perhaps grow enough to sell at market. My mother always had a way with plants, and I seem to have inherited her touch." "I noticed that," Sam nodded. "The seedlings you planted last week are already showing promise. You have a gift." The simple compliment, delivered without flattery or exaggeration, pleased Katherine immensely. Sam truly saw her in a way no one had since her father died. He recognized her strengths without making her feel weak for having needed help, appreciated her independence without feeling threatened by it. As they finished their meal with slices of apple pie and cups of strong coffee, Sam broached a subject that clearly had been on his mind. "Katherine, there's something I'd like to discuss with you," he began, his tone serious though not worrying. "It's about the land I mentioned east of your homestead." "Have you decided to purchase it?" Katherine asked, trying to keep her voice neutral though her heart raced at the implications. "I'm considering it strongly," Sam replied, watching her face carefully. "But before I commit, I wanted to be clear about my intentions toward you." Katherine set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "Your intentions." "I care for you, Katherine," Sam said simply, directly, in the straightforward manner that was so characteristic of him. "I believe you know that. What began as a desire to help someone in need has grown into something much deeper, at least for me. I find myself thinking about you constantly, your smile, your strength, the way you faced adversity with such grace." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I know it's early days yet. We've known each other only a short time. But I want you to understand that if I settle nearby, it's with the hope that one day, if you come to feel for me what I already feel for you, we might build a future together." The sincerity in his blue eyes left no room for doubt. This was not a casual declaration or a passing fancy, but a man laying his heart bare with honest intention. "Sam," Katherine began, her voice soft but steady, "in the few weeks I've known you, you've shown me more kindness, more respect, and more genuine care than I've experienced in years. You helped me reclaim not just my home, but my sense of self-worth." She reached across the table to touch his hand. "I care for you too, deeply. And the thought of you settling nearby, of us having time to see where these feelings lead, makes me happier than I can express." The smile that spread across Sam's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Then I'll speak to the land agent tomorrow," he said, turning his hand to clasp hers. "And Katherine, yes, thank you for your honesty. And for giving me hope for a future I've dreamed of, but never quite believed I'd find." The ride back to the homestead was filled with a new awareness between them, a shared understanding that, while they were taking things slowly, they were moving together toward something meaningful. When they arrived, Sam helped Katherine down from the buggy with the same respectful care he always showed, but this time he held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "May I call on you again tomorrow evening?" he asked. "Perhaps we could have supper together here. I'll bring the fixings." "I'd like that very much," Katherine replied, reluctant to see him go but understanding the propriety he was maintaining for her sake. "Until tomorrow, then," Sam said softly. Before releasing her hand, he bent and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. The simple gesture sent warmth spreading through Katherine's entire body. As she watched him drive away, Katherine hugged herself, hardly able to contain the joy bubbling within her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not just existing but truly living, with hopes and dreams for a future that now included a man whose strength matched her own and whose heart seemed perfectly aligned with hers. The following weeks brought steady progress both to Katherine's homestead and to her blossoming relationship with Sam. True to his word, he purchased the property east of hers and began the work of establishing his own ranch while continuing to help her restore her father's land. They settled into a comfortable routine, working on their respective properties during the day and often sharing evenings together, talking, planning, and growing closer with each passing day. Katherine flourished in her reclaimed independence. Her vegetable garden thrived under her careful tending, providing not only for her own table, but enough surplus to sell at the weekly town market. She added to her small flock of chickens and learned to make cheese from the milk of her 2 cows, skills her mother had begun to teach her before her untimely death. The cabin, too, was transformed. With Sam's help, she repaired and expanded it, adding a larger kitchen and a covered back porch that caught the evening breeze. Fresh paint, new curtains, and furniture rescued from neighbors' attics or crafted by Sam's skilled hands made it a true home again, not just a memorial to her father's life, but a foundation for her future. As spring turned to summer and then to early autumn, Katherine found herself falling deeply in love with Sam Calloway. It wasn't just gratitude for his help or appreciation for his kindness that filled her heart, but genuine admiration for the man he was. His quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, his respect for her independence while offering support when she needed it, all these qualities and more endeared him to her completely. For his part, Sam made his feelings increasingly clear through both words and actions. He never pushed or presumed, always maintaining the respectful distance of proper courtship. But his blue eyes grew warmer when they looked at her, his smiles more intimate, his hand lingering longer when it touched hers. It was on a golden afternoon in late September, as they worked together harvesting the last of the summer vegetables, that Sam finally spoke the words Katherine had been hoping to hear. "Katherine," he said, setting down his basket of tomatoes and turning to face her fully. "There's something I need to ask you." The seriousness in his tone made Katherine's heart skip a beat. She straightened from where she'd been picking beans, pushing back a strand of auburn hair that had escaped her bonnet. "What is it, Sam?" He took a step closer, taking her hands in his. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Working alongside you, watching you rebuild not just your homestead but your life, has been a privilege and a joy." Katherine smiled, squeezing his hands gently. "They've been happy for me too, Sam. I came to Idaho looking for land, for a place to put down roots after years of wandering," Sam continued, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "What I found instead, what I found in you, was a home for my heart that no piece of property could ever provide." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I finally realized there will never be a perfect moment, just perfect certainty." He opened the pouch, revealing a simple gold band with a small, sparkling diamond. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they claimed their land together, just as we're building our lives on neighboring properties now." Sam dropped to one knee in the soft earth of the garden, still holding Katherine's hand. "Katherine O'Malley, I love you with all that I am. I promise to respect your independence while standing by your side, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, to build a life of mutual care and devotion. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of joy filled Katherine's eyes, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. "Yes, Sam," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I love you too so very much." Sam's face lit with a joy that matched her own as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. He rose to his feet and, with a questioning look that Katherine answered by stepping closer, he wrapped his arms around her waist and lifted her in a gentle circle of celebration. When he set her down, his hands remained at her waist, hers on his shoulders, their bodies closer than propriety typically allowed. "May I kiss you, Katherine?" Sam asked softly, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Please," she breathed, her heart pounding with anticipation. Sam lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind if she wished. But Katherine had never been more certain of anything. When his lips finally met hers, soft and gentle at first, then with growing passion as she responded eagerly, Katherine felt as if her entire being was illuminated from within. This was what love should feel like: warm, safe, exhilarating, and right. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the first time I saw you smile," he admitted. "I'm glad you waited," Katherine replied, her hands still on his shoulders, unwilling to create any distance between them. It made it all the more special. They stood in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun began to set over the hills. In that moment, Katherine thought about the long journey that had brought her here, the loss of her parents, the years of servitude, the struggle to reclaim her home and her dignity. For the first time, she was grateful for all of it, for every hardship and every tear, because it had led her to this man, this love, this perfectly imperfect life they would build together. "What are you thinking?" Sam asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Katherine smiled up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "I'm thinking about what my father wrote in his journal before he died. He said he prayed I would find a good man someday, one who would see my value and treat me with respect." She touched Sam's cheek tenderly. "I think he would be very pleased with how his prayer was answered." Sam turned his head to kiss her palm. "I hope so. I wish I could have known him." "He would have liked you," Katherine assured him. "You're similar in many ways, your integrity, your work ethic, your kindness." "High praise indeed," Sam said, clearly touched. "Now, since we're to be married, there's something I've been wanting to ask you about our futures." "What's that?" "I've been thinking your land and mine, side by side but separate. What if we joined them? Made one larger ranch from the two properties? We could run cattle on my land, expand your gardens, perhaps even plant an orchard where the creek runs between the properties." The idea immediately appealed to Katherine. A joint endeavor, truly equal. "Absolutely," Sam confirmed without hesitation. "Your name alongside mine on all deeds and documents. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, a true partnership in every sense." The equality he offered, so rare in a time when wives typically surrendered all property rights to their husbands, touched Katherine deeply. It was further confirmation of the respect that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. "I think that sounds wonderful," she said, slipping her hand into his as they began walking back toward the cabin, leaving the harvest baskets temporarily forgotten. "The Calloway Ranch has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" "The Calloway O'Malley Ranch would be even better," Sam suggested. "To honor your father's legacy as well." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder as they walked. "You continue to amaze me, Samuel Calloway." "I hope to do so for the rest of our lives," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a crisp November day when the hills were painted in russet and gold. It was a simple ceremony at the small church in Lewiston, attended by the friends they had made in the community and performed by Reverend Parker, who spoke movingly about new beginnings and the redemptive power of love. Katherine wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Wilson had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned her mother's wedding gown. Sam looked handsome and slightly nervous in a new suit, his sandy hair neatly combed, his blue eyes never leaving Katherine as she walked down the aisle to join him at the altar. Their vows were straightforward and heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and cherish each other through all the seasons of life. When Sam slipped a second gold band behind her engagement ring and Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Katherine felt a profound sense of rightness, as if all the pieces of her life had finally fallen into perfect alignment. The celebration afterward was held at their homestead, no longer just Katherine's, but theirs together. Neighbors and friends gathered in the yard, which had been decorated with autumn flowers and Chinese lanterns that would glow as evening fell. There was music from a local fiddler, abundant food prepared by the women of the church, and a sense of community that Katherine had missed during her years of isolation at the boarding house. As the celebration continued around them, Sam drew Katherine aside for a quiet moment alone on the porch of what was now their home. "Happy, Mrs. Calloway?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Katherine replied truthfully, raising her face for his kiss. "And you, Mr. Calloway, any regrets about tying yourself to a strong-willed woman with her own homestead?" Sam laughed, the sound warming Katherine from within. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he said, suddenly serious. "When I think of those years you spent working for the Morgans." Katherine placed a finger on his lips to silence him. "No dwelling on the past today. It's our beginning, remember." "Besides," she added with a smile, "if things had been different we might never have met. You might not have come to Lewiston, or I might have been married to someone else." "Never," Sam declared with mock fierceness. "You were meant to be mine, Katherine O'Malley Calloway." "I believe that with absolute certainty." "And I was meant to be yours," she agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him again, heedless of the guests who might see. "Now and always." The celebrations continued into the evening, but eventually the last guest departed, leaving the newlyweds alone in the cabin that would be their home until the larger house they had planned was built on the ridge between their two properties, a perfect symbol of their joined lives. As Katherine stood in their bedroom, removing the pins from her hair, she felt a moment of shyness. Despite the depth of her love for Sam, this aspect of marriage was unknown territory for her. Her mother had died before such conversations could take place, and there had been no maternal figure in her life since to guide her. Sam seemed to sense her nervousness when he entered the room, closing the door softly behind him. "We don't have to rush anything, Katherine," he said gently. "We have all the time in the world." His consideration brought tears to her eyes. "It's not that I don't want to," she assured him quickly. "It's just, I don't know what to expect, what to do." Sam crossed the room to stand before her, taking her hands in his. "Then we'll learn together," he promised. "Step by step, guided by love and respect for each other." And so they did, discovering together the physical expression of the love that had grown between them over the months of their courtship. Sam was patient and gentle, attentive to Katherine's comfort and pleasure, and by the time they lay entwined in each other's arms as midnight approached, any initial awkwardness had given way to a deep sense of intimacy and belonging. "I never knew it could be like this," Katherine murmured against Sam's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "Like what?" he asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "So beautiful. So right." She propped herself up to look into his face, illuminated by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. "I love you, Sam." "And I love you, Katherine," he replied, drawing her down for another kiss. "More than I have words to express." In that moment, in the quiet intimacy of their wedding night, Katherine felt the last shadows of her years of hardship finally lift away completely. The future stretched before them, bright with promise and possibility, a future they would build together as true partners in every sense of the word. The months and years that followed brought both challenges and joys as Sam and Katherine built their life together. Their vision of joining their properties into one larger ranch became reality, with Sam's cattle operation flourishing alongside Katherine's expanded gardens, and the apple orchard they planted together along the creek that now ran through the center of their land, rather than marking a boundary. They built a new house on the ridge as planned, larger and more comfortable than either of their original cabins, but still modest and welcoming. Katherine filled it with simple, beautiful furnishings, many crafted by Sam's hands, creating a home that reflected both of their personalities and the life they were creating together. Their partnership proved as equal in practice as Sam had promised. Katherine's name appeared alongside his on all legal documents related to their property. Her voice carried equal weight in decisions about their business ventures. When they hired hands to help with the ranch work as it expanded, Both Sam and Katherine interviewed and selected them, and both commanded equal respect from the men they employed. Word of their success spread, and other ranchers in the area began to seek Sam's advice on cattle breeding and Katherine's expertise on supplementing ranch income with market gardens. They became respected members of the community, their opinions valued, their example inspiring others to consider more equitable partnerships in their own marriages. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Katherine discovered she was expecting their first child. Sam's joy at the news was boundless, his care for her during the pregnancy touching in its thoroughness. He insisted on hiring additional help for the ranch work, and a woman from town to assist with household tasks, determined that Katherine should not overtax herself. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Katherine often protested, though she secretly enjoyed his attentiveness. "Humor me," Sam would reply with a grin. "It's my first time being a father." Their son, James Samuel Calloway, was born on a snowy December night in 1880 with Mrs. Wilson serving as midwife and Sam pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the infant's first cry rang out. When Sam was finally allowed to enter, the sight of Katherine holding their newborn son in her arms moved him to tears. "He's perfect," Sam whispered, gently touching the downy head with its faint dusting of reddish-blonde hair. "Just like his mother." Katherine looked up at her husband, exhausted but radiant with happiness. "He has your eyes, I think, and your chin." "Poor lad," Sam joked, though his eyes never left the tiny face of his son. "Katherine, you've given me the greatest gift imaginable. Thank you." As James grew from infant to toddler to young boy, he was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Rose, born in the spring of 1883, and another brother, Michael Thomas, who arrived in the summer of 1886. Their home rang with children's laughter and the daily sounds of a busy, loving family. Through it all, through sleepless nights with colicky babies and the inevitable disagreements that come with any marriage, through drought years that threatened the cattle and heavy snow winters that isolated them for weeks, Sam and Katherine's love and partnership only deepened. They faced each challenge together, drawing strength from each other, and from the life they had built from the ashes of their respective pasts. On the evening of their 10th wedding anniversary, after the children had been tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Sam led Katherine out onto the porch of their home. The November air was crisp, the sky ablaze with stars, and a nearly full moon cast silver light across the landscape of their ranch, the cattle peacefully grazing in distant pastures, the orchards they had planted now mature and productive, the barns and outbuildings that had been added as their operation grew. "Remember the first time I saw you?" Sam asked as they settled into the porch swing, his arm around Katherine's shoulders to ward off the evening chill. "At the boarding house," Katherine nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I was mopping the floor, trying to be invisible." "You were the most visible person in the room to me," Sam contradicted her gently. "I saw your exhaustion, but also your dignity. Your hands were raw from work, but you held yourself like a queen in exile." Katherine smiled at the poetic description, so unlike Sam's usual straightforward manner. "And I thought you were just another guest who wouldn't see me at all." "I saw everything," Sam assured her, his voice dropping to a tender murmur. "I saw the woman you were beneath the servitude. I saw the strength they couldn't break. I saw you, Katherine, when everyone else had forgotten how to look." Tears pricked at Katherine's eyes as she turned her face up to his. After 10 years, his handsome features were as dear to her as her own reflection, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes and the few strands of silver beginning to appear in his sandy hair only adding to his appeal. "You saved me," she whispered. Sam shook his head firmly. "No." You saved yourself. You survived until help arrived, and then you seized the opportunity to reclaim your life. I just happened to be the one fortunate enough to be there when you did it, and blessed beyond measure to be the man you chose to share that life with." Katherine kissed him then, putting into the gesture all the love and gratitude that filled her heart. When they parted, she rested her head on his shoulder, their hands entwined as they gazed out at the land they had nurtured together. "If someone had told me, that day you first spoke to me at the boarding house, that in 10 years I would be here your wife, mother to our beautiful children, mistress of our own ranch, I wouldn't have believed it possible," Katherine mused. "And if someone had told me when I rode into Lewiston looking for land, that I would find instead the other half of my soul working herself to exhaustion at a boarding house, I might not have believed that either," Sam replied. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," Katherine echoed softly. "And I wouldn't change a single step of the journey that brought us together." Sam's arm tightened around her shoulders as the moon continued its arc across the star-filled Idaho sky. Below them, their ranch lay peaceful in the silvery light, a testament to what could be built from determination, hard work, and love that recognized no boundaries of convention or expectation, a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into a lifetime of shared purpose and joy. "Rest now," Sam had told her once, in those early days when freedom still felt new and fragile. "I'll provide for us both." But in the end, they had provided for each other, creating together something far stronger and more beautiful than either could have built alone.